You are not anxious because your life is too hard. You are anxious because a specific wire in your engine is losing signal. Most people over 40 never hear that. They hear manage your stress better. They hear try meditation. They hear maybe it's hormones. And none of it fully works because none of it touches the actual mechanism. There is a nerve in your body that controls whether your engine runs in repair mode or in threat mode. It connects your brain to your heart, your lungs, your gut. It has been regulating you quietly your entire life. After 40, it starts losing signal strength. Not dramatically, just enough. Just enough that your system stays slightly braced, even on calm days. Just enough that sleep breaks at 3 a.m. for no reason. Just enough that the anxiety feels heavier than it should. Harder to shake, harder to locate, harder to explain to anyone who hasn't felt it. That nerve is called the vagus nerve. And this video is about exactly what happens to it after 40 and the specific practical steps that restore its signal. This is not stress management. This is engine maintenance. Let's open the hood. Most people have heard the term vagus nerve by now. It shows up in podcasts, in health articles, in conversations between people who are trying to figure out why their body feels different after 40. But hearing a term is not the same as understanding a mechanism. And without the mechanism, you cannot do anything useful with the information. So let's fix that right now. The vagus nerve is not a single wire. It is a network, a long, branching communication cable that starts at the base of your brain, travels down through your neck, wraps around your heart, threads through your lungs, and reaches all the way into your gut. It touches nearly every major organ in your body. And it carries signals in two directions, down from the brain to the organs and up from the organs back to the brain. That second direction is the one almost nobody talks about. Here's why it matters. Roughly 80% of the fibers in the vagus nerve carry information upward from the body to the brain, not the other way around. Your brain is not just sending commands down to the body. Your body is constantly sending reports back up. What the heart is doing, what the gut is feeling, what the lungs are sensing. All of that information travels up through the vagus nerve and lands directly in the brain's control center. It shapes how you think, how you feel, and most critically, how safe or threatened you feel at any given moment. This is the engine metaphor made literal. The vagus nerve is your internal diagnostic line, your real-time sensor feed, the live connection between the organs and the control center. When that line is strong and clean, the control center gets accurate readings. When that line is weak or noisy, the control center starts making decisions based on bad data. Now here is where the whole picture comes into focus. Your autonomic nervous system, the system running everything you don't consciously control, operates in two primary modes. You've heard them called fight or flight and rest and digest. In engine terms, call them alert mode and maintenance mode. Alert mode is designed for short emergencies. Heart rate spikes, breathing shortens, blood moves away from digestion and toward the muscles. Cortisol floods the system. The engine runs hot and fast. That response is completely appropriate for 60 seconds of real danger. Maintenance mode is where repair happens. Heart rate slows, digestion activates, inflammation drops, the brain consolidates memory, cells regenerate, the engine cools, recalibrates, and restores itself. The vagus nerve is the primary switch between those two modes. It is the biological signal that tells the engine, the threat is gone. Stand down. Begin repairs. And here is the problem. That switch has a strength. Researchers measure it through something called vagal tone. Think of vagal tone as the signal quality of your internal diagnostic line. High vagal tone means the engine switches efficiently from alert back to maintenance with precision and speed. Low vagal tone means the engine gets stuck. It stays in alert mode long after the threat has passed. It runs hot, continuously. Studies measuring heart rate variability, the most reliable live proxy for vagal tone, have consistently shown the same pattern. People with lower vagal tone report higher anxiety, worse sleep, greater difficulty regulating emotion, and significantly higher levels of systemic inflammation. That last part carries weight, because in engine terms, chronic inflammation is contaminated fuel. It runs through every system. Over time, it degrades the heart, the brain, the gut lining, the joints, and low vagal tone is one of the central reasons inflammation stays elevated, even when there is no active threat in your life. So when you feel that anxiety that won't fully resolve, that low hum of tension living just beneath the surface, it is often not a psychological failure. It is a signal quality failure. The vagus nerve is not sending a strong enough maintenance command to pull the engine out of alert. That is a mechanical problem, and mechanical problems respond to mechanical solutions. Here is something simple you can start noticing today. After something stressful happens, a difficult conversation, a piece of bad news, a near miss in traffic, watch how long it takes your body to come back down. How long before your shoulders drop? How long before your breathing slows? How long before you stop replaying it? That recovery window is a live readout of your vagal tone. Fast, smooth recovery, strong signal. Long, sticky recovery where you stay activated for hours, weak signal. You are not overreacting. The switch is losing precision. In the next card, we are going to look at exactly why that happens after 40, because the reason is more specific and more fixable than most people realize. Here is what most people get wrong about anxiety after 40. They assume it is circumstantial. More responsibility, more pressure, more to lose. And yes, life in your 40s carries real weight, but that explanation alone does not account for what people actually experience. It does not explain why the anxiety feels different now, heavier, more ambient, harder to rationalize away even when nothing specific is wrong. The difference is biological. Something is changing inside the engine itself. And until you understand what those changes are, you will keep treating the output without ever touching the mechanism. Let's go through it, one layer at a time. The first layer is hormonal. For women, the transition into perimenopause brings a significant and often erratic decline in estrogen. Most people think of estrogen as a reproductive hormone. That framing misses most of what it actually does. Estrogen has direct regulatory effects on the nervous system. It modulates the sensitivity of receptors throughout the brain that govern calm, safety, and emotional proportion. It supports the production of serotonin and GABA, two of the primary neurotransmitters that keep the threat response calibrated. When estrogen begins to fluctuate and fall, the brain's ability to regulate its own alarm system weakens. The threshold for triggering alert mode drops. And the vagus nerve, which depends on a well-calibrated nervous system to send its maintenance signal cleanly, starts losing precision. For men, the picture is different, but equally significant. Testosterone declines gradually through the 40s and 50s, and testosterone, among its many roles, has a direct dampening effect on the amygdala, the brain's primary threat detection center. As testosterone drops, the amygdala becomes more reactive, more sensitive to ambient input. Minor stressors start producing responses that feel disproportionate. The engine begins misreading the road. Both shifts, in estrogen and in testosterone, reduce the effective strength of the vagal brake. The recovery window stretches, and over time, alert mode stops feeling like a state the body enters and exits. It starts feeling like a permanent setting. The second layer is inflammatory. Researchers have a name for it, inflammaging. It describes the chronic, low-grade inflammatory state that accumulates in the body as a natural consequence of aging. By the mid-40s, it is already measurable in standard blood markers, and it does something very specific to the nervous system. Inflammaging activates what scientists call sickness behavior, a mode where the brain increases threat sensitivity, reduces motivation, conserves energy, and keeps the system on continuous low-level alert. Not because a threat exists, because the inflammatory signal itself reads like one. In engine terms, inflammaging is running on fuel that has been slightly contaminated for years. The engine keeps going, but not cleanly. And the control center starts receiving threat signals that don't correspond to anything real. This is one of the reasons anxiety after 40 often feels sourceless. In your 20s, anxiety had a clear address, a deadline, a relationship, a specific fear. After 40, it often arrives without one. Diffuse, ambient, a low hum you cannot locate. That is inflammaging talking to your nervous system, and a weakened vagus nerve without enough signal strength to answer back. The third layer is structural. The vagus nerve itself changes with time. The myelin sheath, the protective coating that keeps nerve signals fast, clean, and precise, degrades gradually with age, with chronic stress, and with metabolic dysfunction. A poorly myelinated nerve conducts a slower signal. A noisier one, less surgical, less authoritative. Recent research has found a consistent relationship between metabolic health and vagal tone. People with elevated blood sugar, visceral fat accumulation, and high blood pressure show measurably lower heart rate variability than metabolically healthy people of the same age. The fuel system and the signal system are not separate. When one degrades, the other follows. The fourth layer is sleep. The vagus nerve does much of its deepest repair work during slow-wave sleep. During that stage, the nervous system recalibrates, the threat response dampens, the vagal signal is essentially refreshed for the next day. After 40, slow-wave sleep decreases significantly, not necessarily in total hours, in depth, in architecture, in the quality of what actually happens during those hours. An engine that is not getting adequate overnight maintenance starts each day already running slightly hot, not because anything went wrong during the night. Because not enough repair happened. These four layers, hormonal, inflammatory, structural, and sleep-related, do not operate in isolation. They form a compounding loop, each one amplifying the effect of the others. And the result is what so many people over 40 describe but struggle to name. Not clinical anxiety, necessarily, just a body that won't fully settle, a nervous system that stays slightly braced, an engine that never quite cools between runs. Now that you understand why the signal weakens, the next question is the only one that actually matters. What does it take to restore it? Now we get practical. Everything we covered so far is real. The degraded signal, the hormonal shifts, the engine stuck in alert mode. All of it is real, and all of it is addressable. The vagus nerve is one of the most responsive systems in your body when you know how to speak to it directly. It has specific inputs it recognizes, physical inputs, mechanical inputs. Things you can begin applying today that produce measurable changes, not metaphorical changes, actual shifts visible in heart rate variability, inflammatory markers, and sleep quality. Let me walk you through the first set of tools. The first one is extended exhale breathing. And I want to be precise here because most people do a version of this that is too gentle to actually move the needle. They breathe slowly, feel slightly calmer, and assume that is the protocol. It is not. The research is specific. The vagus nerve connects mechanically to the diaphragm. When the exhale is significantly longer than the inhale, not slightly longer, significantly longer, it activates the parasympathetic branch through direct mechanical stimulation. The ratio that shows up consistently in clinical data is 4 counts in, 8 counts out. The exhale must be at least twice the length of the inhale. That ratio is not a suggestion. It is the threshold. 10 minutes of that specific ratio, practiced daily, produces measurable improvements in vagal tone within 2 weeks. Heart rate variability studies have confirmed this repeatedly. 2 weeks, not 2 months. The protocol is straightforward. 10 minutes in the morning before you get out of bed, 10 minutes in the afternoon when you feel the engine starting to run hot. That is a calibration exercise, not a relaxation ritual. The difference in how you frame it changes whether you actually do it consistently. The second tool is cold exposure on the face and neck. The vagus nerve runs directly through the neck, and it carries thermoreceptors, sensors that respond to cold contact with immediate measurable force. When cold water touches the face and neck, it triggers what physiologists call the diving reflex. Heart rate drops, the vagal brake engages hard. The system is pulled out of alert mode faster than any breathing technique can achieve. You do not need expensive equipment for this. Splashing cold water on your face for 30 seconds works. Running cold water along both sides of your neck for 60 seconds works. Ending a warm shower with 30 to 60 seconds of cold produces a stronger and longer-lasting effect. For acute moments, when anxiety has a grip and the engine is running hot right now, cold exposure is the most immediate reset available. The mechanism is direct, the response is fast, and it costs nothing. The third tool is humming, singing, and gargling. This one surprises people, but the mechanism is clean and well documented. The vagus nerve directly innervates the muscles of the throat, the larynx, and the vocal cords. When you vibrate those muscles through humming, chanting, singing, or vigorous gargling, you are physically stimulating the vagus nerve through its own tissue. Neuroscientist Stephen Porges, whose work on the nervous system has reshaped how researchers understand anxiety and safety, identified vocal vibration as one of the most direct activators of the ventral vagal complex. That is the part of the vagus nerve associated with felt safety, calm connection, and emotional regulation. The part that tells the control center, there is no threat here. You can stand down. You do not need to sing well. You do not need to do it loudly. A low, sustained hum for 2 minutes works. Vigorous gargling with water for 60 seconds, twice a day, works. This is nerve mechanics. The vibration reaches the nerve directly. The nerve responds directly. The fourth tool is slow, rhythmic walking, but with a specific condition attached. Many people over 40 are using exercise in a way that makes anxiety worse, not better. When the system is already running in cortisol-dominant alert mode, high-intensity exercise spikes cortisol further. It pushes an already overheating engine harder, and then people wonder why they feel more wired, not less, after a hard workout. What the vagus nerve actually responds to is different. Rhythmic, moderate, sustained movement, specifically at a pace where nasal breathing remains comfortable throughout. Not gasping, not mouth breathing. Comfortable nasal breathing, maintained for the full duration. That combination, rhythmic muscle contractions, moderate heart rate, nasal breathing, produces a sustained parasympathetic signal. The engine moves. It burns fuel, it generates heat, but it does not overheat. Heart rate variability data consistently shows this type of movement improves vagal tone more reliably than high-intensity training in people whose cortisol is already elevated. 30 minutes, nasal breathing the entire time. No aggressive music pushing you past the threshold. That is the protocol. 4 tools, 4 different pathways into the same nerve. Breathing reaches it through the diaphragm. Cold reaches it through the thermoreceptors in the neck. Vocal vibration reaches it through the throat tissue. Slow movement reaches it through the rhythmic motor parasympathetic connection. Start with one, the one that creates the least resistance right now. Practice it for 2 weeks before adding another. This is a calibration sequence. It requires repetition, not intensity. But these 4 tools work on the surface layer of the system. They produce real, measurable effects. And they are not enough on their own. There is a deeper layer, one that works from the inside out, through the gut, through the fuel system, through the architecture of your sleep. And that layer is where the long-term signal restoration actually happens. That is where we are going next. The 4 tools we just covered work fast. They reach the vagus nerve through its surface connections, the diaphragm, the thermoreceptors, the throat tissue, the motor system. They produce real, measurable shifts in nervous system state. sometimes within minutes. But they have a ceiling. If the deeper systems feeding the vagus nerve are compromised, if the gut is sending degraded signals upward, if the nerve's structural integrity is eroding, if overnight repair is being cut short, the surface tools become maintenance on a system that keeps losing ground underneath. This part is about the deeper layer, the inputs that change the baseline, the ones that don't produce an immediate sensation of calm, but that raise the floor of your nervous system over weeks and months. The difference between managing a signal and actually restoring it. Let's start with the gut. The vagus nerve has more nerve endings in the gut than almost anywhere else in the body, and the communication between the gut and the brain through the vagus nerve is not metaphorical. It is structural, continuous, bidirectional. Researchers now call it the gut-brain axis. And what has emerged from the last decade of research on this axis has changed how we understand anxiety at a fundamental level. Here is the finding that matters most for this conversation. Certain strains of gut bacteria produce neurotransmitters, including GABA, serotonin precursors, and short-chain fatty acids that directly stimulate the vagal fibers running through the gut wall, the fibers carrying signals upward to the brain. When your microbiome is diverse and healthy, it sends a continuous stream of calming, regulatory signals up through the vagus nerve to the control center. When your microbiome is depleted through poor diet, chronic stress, antibiotic use, or the natural changes of aging, that upward signal weakens. A landmark study published in Nature Microbiology found that people with lower microbial diversity showed consistently lower vagal tone and significantly higher rates of anxiety and depression. The gut was not reacting to the anxiety. The gut was generating it through the vagus nerve. So feeding your microbiome is a direct form of vagal maintenance, not a wellness concept, a mechanical input with a measurable output. The most effective way to do that is through dietary fiber diversity. Not one type of fiber, not a single fiber supplement. Diversity. The research on microbiome health converges on one finding above all others. Variety of plant inputs determines microbial diversity more than any other single factor. People who consume 30 or more different plant foods per week show significantly greater microbial diversity than people eating 10 or fewer. 30 sounds overwhelming until you understand what counts. Every vegetable, every fruit, every legume, every whole grain, every nut, every seed, every herb and spice. Each one counts separately. Adding cumin to your eggs in the morning counts. Adding a handful of walnuts to your afternoon meal counts. You are not overhauling your diet. You are expanding the variety of inputs into the fuel system. Think of it as diversifying the fuel blend so that every engine component gets what it specifically needs. Two other nutrients deserve direct attention here. The first is omega-3 fatty acids. The relationship between omega-3 intake and vagal tone is consistent across multiple study populations. Higher omega-3 intake correlates with higher heart rate variability. The mechanism involves two pathways, reducing neuroinflammation and supporting the myelin sheath, the protective coating on the vagus nerve fibers that keeps the signal fast and clean. When that coating degrades, the signal slows. When omega-3 intake is adequate, degradation slows measurably. Fatty fish 2 to 3 times per week, salmon, sardines, mackerel, herring, or a high-quality fish oil supplement providing at least 2 grams of combined EPA and DHA daily is a direct structural investment in the nerve itself. The second is magnesium. Magnesium is involved in over 300 enzymatic processes in the body. One of its most critical roles for the nervous system is regulating the NMDA receptor, a key receptor in the brain's threat response circuitry. When magnesium levels are low, that receptor becomes hyperactive. The threat response fires more easily, more intensely, and stays activated longer. Low magnesium is extraordinarily common after 40, and the reason is compounding. Chronic stress depletes magnesium rapidly, and modern diets, even relatively healthy ones, tend to be insufficient. The depletion drives anxiety, The anxiety drives further depletion. The loop runs quietly in the background while people try to manage symptoms that have a nutritional root. Magnesium glycinate, or magnesium threonate, taken in the evening, is one of the most evidence-supported, lowest-risk nutritional interventions for nervous system regulation available. Not a cure. A meaningful, consistent input into a system that is almost certainly running low. Now, sleep. Because this is where everything either consolidates or erodes. The vagus nerve does its deepest repair work during slow-wave sleep. During that stage specifically, the glymphatic system activates, a waste clearance network in the brain that flushes out inflammatory proteins accumulating during waking hours. A well-functioning glymphatic cycle directly reduces the neuroinflammation that weakens the vagal signal. Miss slow-wave sleep consistently, and the system starts each day carrying yesterday's inflammatory load forward. After 40, slow-wave sleep decreases naturally, but several inputs accelerate that decrease far beyond what aging alone would produce. Alcohol in the evening suppresses slow-wave sleep significantly, even 1 or 2 drinks. Eating within 2 hours of bed activates digestion during a phase the body needs for neural repair. Screen exposure in the hour before sleep delays melatonin onset and shortens the deepest sleep stages. And room temperatures above 68 degrees Fahrenheit measurably reduce slow wave depth. 3 specific adjustments. Keep the bedroom between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Stop eating at least 2 to 3 hours before sleep. And use the extended exhale breathing protocol for 10 minutes before bed. It directly activates the parasympathetic state the body needs to enter deep sleep efficiently. These are not generic sleep hygiene suggestions. They are overnight maintenance protocols for the vagal restoration system. The surface tools restore the signal in the moment. The deeper tools raise the floor permanently. You need both running simultaneously. When they are, the system begins to shift in ways that nothing else has produced before. In the next part, we pull back and look at the full picture. How everything we've covered connects into one coherent system, and why the vagus nerve sits at the center of healthy aging, not just anxiety. Let's pull back, not to summarize, but to see the whole engine at once. Because when you look at everything we've covered, the vagus nerve, the vagal tone, the 4 biological layers that weaken the signal after 40, the 2 sets of restoration tools, something important happens. The individual pieces stop looking like separate problems. They start revealing a single coherent mechanism. And that shift in perspective changes everything about how you approach your own body from here. Here is the systems view. After 40, the engine undergoes a set of changes that are gradual, cumulative, and interconnected. Hormones shift. The inflammatory baseline rises. Slow-wave sleep shortens. The gut microbiome loses diversity. The myelin sheath on the vagus nerve begins to thin. Each of these changes is relatively modest in isolation. Together, they converge on one outcome: a weakened vagal signal and a nervous system that defaults increasingly toward alert mode. Now, think about the symptoms most people over 40 report. Not as separate complaints, but as outputs of that one degraded system. The anxiety that won't fully resolve. That is a nervous system that cannot execute a clean return to maintenance mode. The vagal brake is weak. The engine stays hot after activation. The weight gain, particularly around the abdomen, that resists every intervention. That is a body running chronically in cortisol-dominant alert mode. Cortisol drives fat storage, particularly visceral fat. A system stuck in alert mode produces cortisol continuously. The weight is not a willpower problem. It is a system state problem. The brain fog, the difficulty concentrating, the sense that your thinking is slower, less sharp than it used to be. That is a control center operating on degraded overnight repair and elevated neuroinflammation. The glymphatic system is not clearing the inflammatory load fully. The control center is running on a dirty circuit. The sleep that breaks at 3 a.m. with no obvious cause, that is a nervous system that never fully disengaged from alert mode before bed. The vagal signal was not strong enough to carry the system into deep maintenance overnight. So it surfaces, restless, scanning for threats that aren't there. These are not 4 separate problems requiring 4 separate solutions. They are 4 outputs of one degraded control system. And the vagus nerve, its signal strength, its ability to execute the shift from alert to maintenance, sits at the center of all of them. Think of it this way. Imagine a sophisticated thermal regulation system in a high-performance engine. It relies on a network of sensors, coolant lines, and a central thermostat to keep the engine at optimal operating temperature under varying conditions. Now imagine that over years, the sensors lose precision. The coolant lines develop partial blockages. The thermostat starts misreading temperature by a small but consistent margin. The engine does not fail. It keeps running, but it runs slightly hotter than it should, continuously. And that persistent low-grade overheating degrades every component it touches, over months, over years, in ways that look like separate failures, but share a single root cause. That is your nervous system after 40, without deliberate vagal maintenance. The anxiety is the overheating alarm. The weight accumulation is the metabolic consequence of running hot too long. The brain fog is the control center on a degraded circuit. The broken sleep is the overnight maintenance cycle being cut short before the system fully recalibrates. One mechanism, multiple outputs, one restoration strategy at the center of all of them. And here is what the research on vagal tone interventions actually shows. This is where the picture becomes genuinely hopeful, rather than just intellectually satisfying. Studies combining breathing protocols, dietary changes, and sleep optimization in adults over 40 have shown measurable improvements in heart rate variability, self-reported anxiety, and inflammatory markers within 6 to 12 weeks of consistent practice. Not 6 months, not a year. 6 to 12 weeks. The engine is responsive, more responsive than most people give it credit for at this stage of life. What changes after 40 is not the engine's capability. What changes is the maintenance it requires, the inputs it needs, the attentiveness it demands. An engine that ran reliably on minimal maintenance in your 20s now needs a more precise hand on the controls. That is not failure. That is a different phase of operation. And here is the thing that most people over 40 find quietly relieving when they finally hear it stated plainly. The anxiety you carry, the tension that won't fully resolve, the vigilance that follows you even into calm moments, the sense that your nervous system is slightly braced for something that never arrives, that is not a character flaw. It is not weakness. It is not evidence that something is fundamentally, unfixably wrong with you. It is a signal quality issue. Your engine is responding accurately to the inputs it is receiving. Weak vagal tone, elevated inflammation, disrupted sleep architecture, a gut microbiome sending a quieter signal upward than it used to. These are real inputs producing real outputs. Change the inputs deliberately, consistently, intelligently, and the outputs change. That is not optimism. That is systems logic. You now have the full picture, the mechanism, the failure points, the restoration protocol, both layers of tools, and the system's view that connects all of it into a coherent whole. What remains is understanding what this means for the long arc. Not just for managing how you feel this week, but for the quality of your nervous system and your life 10 years from now. That is where we are going next. Let's talk about time. Not abstractly, specifically. Because everything in this video becomes exponentially more valuable when you stop thinking about it as anxiety relief and start thinking about it as a long-term investment in the quality of your nervous system. The research on vagal tone and long-term health outcomes is one of the most consistent bodies of evidence in modern medicine. Higher vagal tone in midlife is associated with lower rates of cardiovascular disease, lower rates of cognitive decline, lower rates of metabolic syndrome, and significantly better outcomes across nearly every chronic condition that people over 40 fear most. This is not correlation without mechanism. We understand why. A nervous system that regulates well keeps inflammation lower over years, not just hours. It keeps the heart rhythm more stable, keeps the brain's overnight repair cycles more complete, keeps the metabolic engine running closer to its design parameters for longer. The vagus nerve is not just the master switch for anxiety. It is a central pillar of how well you age. And the work you do on it now, in your 40s, your 50s, does not just help you feel better this month. It compounds forward in ways that shape who you are at 65, at 70. The engine you maintain today is the engine you will live inside for the next 30 years. That is worth sitting with for a moment. This channel exists because that kind of thinking is rare, right? It should not be. The human engine is not here to motivate you. It is not here to sell you a 30-day fix or remind you to believe in yourself. That is not what this is. This is a channel for people over 40 who are done being confused by their own bodies, who want the actual mechanisms, who are ready to approach the second half of their lives the way a skilled engineer approaches a high-performance machine, with precision, with patience, and with the right protocols running consistently in the background. If that is you, subscribe and stay close. Every video goes deeper into one specific system: metabolism, hormones, sleep, cardiovascular function, brain performance, gut health, always through the same lens. Your body is an engine. Your job after 40 is to understand it well enough to maintain it properly. We are building a community of people who think this way. Men and women over 40 who have stopped chasing quick fixes and started investing in the long game. If you are still here at this point in the video, you already know which one you are. Now, let's bring everything together. You came into this video having heard the words vagus nerve. What you have now is something different, a working model. A clear picture of why the nervous system changes after 40, what the biological forces behind that change actually are, and what a real restoration protocol looks like, both the surface layer that works fast and the deeper layer that raises the floor permanently. That is not just information. That is a maintenance manual for a specific phase of engine life. And in the final part of this video, I want to leave you with something that lives beyond the mechanics. Because understanding how the engine works is one thing. Knowing how to think about your engine, especially when the body starts behaving in ways that feel unfamiliar, even frightening, is something else entirely. That is what the next few minutes are for. There is a moment that many people over 40 describe in almost exactly the same words. It does not happen at a doctor's office. It does not arrive during a health scare necessarily. It happens quietly, usually alone. Sometimes in the middle of an ordinary evening, when nothing is specifically wrong, it is the moment when something in you, something patient, something that has been waiting and rationalizing and giving it more time, finally admits that the body you are living in now does not respond the way it used to, and that waiting is not a strategy. That moment is not a defeat. It is a diagnostic reading. Your engine is not failing. Your engine is asking for a different kind of maintenance than it needed 10 years ago. And there is an enormous difference between those two things. A failing engine is a tragedy. An engine with changing maintenance requirements is just engineering. The vagus nerve has been doing its job your entire life, quietly regulating, quietly repairing, quietly holding the line between threat and safety, between alert and rest, between inflammation and calm. It did not stop doing its job after 40. It started needing more deliberate support to keep doing it well. The hormonal environment changed. The inflammatory baseline shifted. The sleep architecture thinned. The gut lost some of its upward signal richness. None of that happened because something went wrong with you. It happened because you are running a sophisticated engine through one of the most demanding phases of human life, and the maintenance protocol needs to evolve with it. You now know what that protocol looks like. Extended exhale breathing to pull the system out of alert mode. Cold exposure to engage the vagal brake directly. Vocal vibration to stimulate the nerve through its own tissue. Slow rhythmic movement to keep the engine running without overheating. Diverse plant fiber to restore the gut's upward signal. Omega-3s and magnesium to protect the nerve's structural integrity. And sleep architecture, protected, cooled, unhurried, to allow the overnight repair cycle to run fully. Not hacks, not biohacks, maintenance protocols for a specific phase of engine life. And here is what I want you to carry with you after this video ends. The anxiety you feel is real. The tension that won't fully resolve is real. The sense that your nervous system is slightly braced, even on quiet days, that is real. But it is not a verdict. It is not evidence of weakness. It is not a forecast for the years ahead. It is a signal, a very specific, very addressable signal from a very specific, very responsive system. You were not given a broken engine. You were given an engine that has earned decades of hard running and that now requires a more attentive hand on the controls. That is not a burden. That is a privilege available to anyone willing to pay attention. Because the people who figure this out, who stop fighting their body and start maintaining it with intelligence, are the ones who arrive at 60 and 70, still sharp, still capable, still fully themselves. Not despite aging, through understanding it. That is the goal here. Not a younger-looking face. Not a number on a scale. A nervous system that regulates. A brain that stays clear. A body that remains capable of the life you actually want to live. Healthy years, not just more years. If this video gave you a clearer picture of your own engine, I want to ask you for 3 things. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already. Every week we go deeper into one specific system, and it builds. Each video adds to the picture. Share this video with 5 people in your life who are over 40 and quietly struggling. With the anxiety, with the sleep, with a body that feels unfamiliar. They may not have the language for what they are experiencing. This video might give it to them. And leave a comment below. Tell me which tool you are starting with first. I read every one, and your answer shapes what this channel builds next. If you have a topic you want us to go deep on, cortisol and weight resistance, heart rate variability as a longevity marker, the full gut-brain axis, what actually happens to hormones during sleep, put it in the comments. The next video comes from you. Until next time, keep optimizing.